There, I'm recording now. Um, Keep your cameras on mute while other people are telling stories. That's the most important rule of etiquette on Zoom. And other than that, you can, your cell phone can go off. Anything else can happen. Your timer can go off. You can microwave something. A dog can bark. As long as you're on mute, it doesn't upset anything. But once again, welcome to Do Tell. And we are going to change the order of things tonight. We're going to have announcements after our break. We normally hear some stories, and then we have a circle where we all introduce ourselves and answer a very brief prompt. Then we're going to have a break, and then we'll have announcements and possibly some more stories. So that's the order of things tonight. I want to just point out that we owe a debt of gratitude to our two coordinators, Katie Mangan and Meg Brown, who make this all possible. And of course, we have one of our founders here, Elaine Stanley, as well. So it's always nice to have everybody present here. Without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the first storyteller, and it is Beth Wakely. Let's see, Beth, let me find you. There you are.
I am here. I am here.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot I couldn't be big. My story comes to you from the fair Emerald Isle, and it is called The Woman Who Flummoxed the Fairies. Now, there was once a woman who could bake so incredibly well that her bannocks were like wheaten cakes, and her scones were as light as air, but her cakes themselves were like nothing but heaven in your mouth. And so she was in great demand whenever there was a celebration of any sort, a christening, a wedding. And if a person could pay, she charged a pretty penny. But if a poor folk just wanted a tiny bit for celebration, she would bake just as fine a cake as she would for the laird and send it with best regards to the parents or to the couple with her husband's blessing as a gift, so there'd be no hurt feelings. Now, she was not only a baker of great renown, she was very clever too. And it is the first that got her into trouble and the second that got her out. For in that time, the fairy folk were still flying freely, not to be seen much, but they too loved a piece of good cake and would be known to go into a kitchen and steal a slice or two if they could. And the cake they wanted most was not to be had, for there was nary a crumb left after she had baked a cake. There was just much to do except to plot and plan and think how could they get them into their fairyland to bake just for them forever. Well, there was to be a great wedding at the manor home. It was not far from where the woman lives, and so she walked back and forth, and the fairies listened at the keyhole, and they heard which route she'd be taking home, and so they laid out their plans. And she had finished her preparations and was walking home, weary, ready to see her babe and her husband, tucked her apron in her pocket, and as she crossed the path, the area where a little knoll came up, lo and behold, she had no idea the fairies were hiding behind the flowers and the leaves. And as soon as she passed, they rushed her and threw the fern dust in her face. I am so tired. She immediately sat down, not realizing what had happened until she awoke. She had sat right to the entrance of fairyland indeed. And when she opened her eyes and saw where she was, she thought very quickly, look at this, I'm in fairyland. I've always wanted, and here it is. And the king of the fairies said, we want to have you bake cakes for us for the rest of the time that you're here. Well, she said, and the wee folk, I've been leaving you without any cake? You have had none of mine. Well, then, of course, I'll be baking you a cake. And she put on her apron and looked around and said, but I'm not seeing any ingredients for the cake, and so I'll be needing some for my kitchen." And the fairies were eager to help, and she sent some for eggs and some for butter and some for sugar and some for flour and all the things that were needed to bake a cake. They lined up and all assembled and ready to go, and she said, "I'll need a bowl." But all the fairies had was a tiny, tiny teacup-sized bowl, not near. She said, "I'll need my big bowl and my wooden spoons and my whisk." And off they went again, flying back and forth with the things she needed. She'd just gotten the batter started and began stirring until she realized, "Oh, it's no good. I can't keep the rhythm without my cat purring." "Get the cat," said the king of the fairies. And the cat came and sat by her feet. And the cat purred, and she stirred some more and said, "Oh, wouldn't you know, I need the dog. My dog's snoring every second snore. I keep the beat just right." And of course, fetch the dog. The dog arrived, looking up and laid right down and began to snore. And things were going pretty well until she stopped all of a sudden and said, "Oh, all day I've been without my babe. I just can't. I just can't imagine. He must be so sad. I've been so busy. And I'm sure he hasn't had his dinner yet." "Fetch the babe," said the king of the fairies, and off they went again. And as soon as that babe saw his ma, he began to squeal and scream just as a hungry babe could, louder than you can believe, ear-splitting noise. And she was beating the batter, and she gave her babe a wooden spoon as she changed the whisk and became the important part of the beating. And the babe was beating the floor and screaming. And she said, "Perhaps I can't stop now. Perhaps my husband could help it." So, of course, without finishing the sentence, whoosh, he appeared. And he held the babe, but he never stopped screaming. And as she was whisking, she turned to her husband and whispered, "Pinch the dog." And he didn't know why, but he did. And the dog began to howl. And then she said again, "Tread on the tail of the cat." And he did. And you could imagine the din that was created. The cat was yelling, and the baby was screaming, and the wooden spoon was pounding, and the dog was barking, and the fairies were flying hither and round because their little ears were hurting so much. If there's anything a fairy can't stand, it's a lot of noise. And there was more than a lot of noise in that fairyland that night. She'd gotten the cake just at the right place in the batter, and she put it into the prepared pans. And she took the babe and stuck a cube of sugar right in his mouth, which surprised him so much he stopped crying. And she nodded to her husband, and he put his foot away, and he stopped pinching the dog, and quiet descended. And so did those fairies as they collapsed in exhaustion. And she said, "My cake is all ready to bake, but where's the oven?" The king of the fairies and all of them looked at each other in dismay, for there was no oven to be had. "I guess you'll just have to take me to my own kitchen, and when it's finished, bring me back." Well, they looked at each other, those fairies, in just disbelief. They were exhausted, and the king said, "You may all leave, but don't be expecting us to take you home. We're exhausted." "Ah," said the woman, "you'll be needing your cake," because now that she had what she wanted, she definitely felt a little sad and wanted to have their fairy cake, and said, "And so I will bake the cake. I will leave the finished cake where you found me." The king, feeling a bit revived and anticipating that cake, said, "I'll not be outdone. What you find there shall be yours." And so he split open the earth, and off they walked, the husband laden down with all of the material items that were there, and she with the babe, the pans of batter, and the dog and the cat. And they continued down the path to her home, and they never looked back. Well, the cake was cooking in the oven, and the babe was eating the porridge, and all that could be heard in that little cottage was the purring of the cat, and the snoring of the dog, and the ticking of the clock, and all the wonderful noises a home should have. And when the cake was finished, she took it back and left it right where she said. And what did she find there? A small bag of gold. And so it continued. Every week she left a cake for the fairy folk, and they left her a small bag of gold, which added up and up. And so that family thrived and lived, and why should they not, happily ever after. The end.
Oh, Beth, that was fantastic. There's nothing like the power of a family to flummox not only fairies, but anybody else. I remember when I was a grad student, I had my 1-year-old daughter, and when I couldn't answer a question in the seminar, I would just pinch, 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 and she would start crying, and I'd have to leave. Well, thank you for that story very much, Beth. That was wonderful. And so we move on to our next storyteller. We're in for a treat. It is one of our coordinators. Please welcome to our Zoom stage, Meg Brown.
Hi, everybody. I hope that this is going to come off well on the video, but I'll do my best. When I first started out to try to tell stories, I looked around for resources and I found an old set of Bookhouse books. And this is a story from one of those Bookhouse books. It's called The Girl Who Used Her Wits. Long ago in China, there was a widow who was named Fun Chow. She had 2 sons, and when they grew up, they went to a faraway village to find some young ladies to get married to. And indeed, they found 2 lovely girls, and they got married. And after all of the festivities were done, they took the 2 young ladies, their brides, back home to live with them and their mother, Fun Chow. Now, Lotus Blossom and Moonflower were very obedient, respectful, and kind young ladies, and they took very good care of their mother-in-law. They prepared all the wonderful foods that she loved to eat, and they brought her her afternoon tea on her little lacquered tray, and they did all the things that she asked them to do. But after a while, they began to miss their family and friends there in their village, and they started to ask her a lot of times to let them go back, please, to their village for a visit. Fun Chow did not want them to go. She found them very useful, and she enjoyed all the attention that they gave her. But one morning, she was just so annoyed when they came to her and asked yet again, could they go back to their village and visit? And so she said, well, yes, my dears, you may go back to your village and visit your family and friends. But I have been wanting some things that for a very long time, and I would like for you to bring them to me as gifts. The first thing, Lotus Blossom, is wind in a paper. And Moonflower, I would like you to bring me fire in a paper. Well, the girls were so excited that they agreed immediately without even thinking about it. And they went up and they packed up their things and kissed their husbands goodbye. And they set off on the road to their village. Well, as they were going along, all of a sudden, Lotus Blossom began to think about what she had promised her mother-in-law. She began to get very, very upset and worried. And Moonflower said, Lotus Blossom, what is wrong? What has happened? And when Lotus Blossom told Moonflower about remembering the gifts that they had both promised, the girls began to be very unhappy. And they went to the side of the road and they sat down and they began to cry. Well, just then, a young girl riding on a water buffalo came in from the fields along the road, and she saw the 2 young women sitting by the side of the road crying. She got off the buffalo and she went to them and she said, oh, sisters, what is wrong? What has happened? So the 2 young ladies told the girl all about their troubles and the gifts that they had promised to their mother-in-law. Says the girl, why don't you come home to my house and we will have some tea and we will figure out what to do. And so the two young ladies went to the girls' home. They sat on the little veranda and had tea, and they thought and they thought. And all of a sudden, the girl jumped up and she ran into the house. And when she came back, in one hand, she had a beautiful paper fan. And in the other hand, she had a paper lantern with a candle glowing on the inside. She waved the fan across the face of Lotus Blossom and she felt the wind. Perfect, said Lotus Blossom. This will make a wonderful gift for my mother-in-law. And then Moonflower looked and she saw the lantern and she saw that was perfect also as a gift for her mother-in-law. So they thanked the young girl profusely and complimented her on her intelligence. And they set off for their visit to their home village. And they had a wonderful time visiting with all their friends and family. Well, Fun Chow was wondering when those girls were going to be coming back and whether they were going to come back with the gifts. And she knew that if they did not come, she was not going to let them back into the family. So one morning she was looking out the window and she saw the two girls. They were coming home down the road. So she ran down to the door and she stood in the doorway. And when they arrived, she said, "What are you doing back here? Have you come back without anything that I requested?" But the girls just smiled. And Lotus Blossom took from the sleeve of her kimono the beautiful fan, and she put it up to the cheek of her mother-in-law and began to wave it so that the air blew coolly across Fun Chow's face. And Fun Chow turned to Moonflower. "And you, have you forgotten what you were supposed to bring for me?" But Moonflower took out from behind her back a beautiful paper lantern with a candle glowing inside of it. Said Fun Chow. "Maybe these girls aren't as stupid as I actually thought." So she smiled at the girls and she said, "Come, let us go inside and let us have some tea." And that was the end of the story.
That was wonderful. I love stories with a riddle in the middle. It's like the riddle of the Sphinx, you know, where the answer is just so clever and obvious at the same time. Wow, we've had two very polished stories tonight. Those were both wonderful. Thank you, Meg. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And I guess we are in for a very true story next. Probably a true story, but with a little bit of exaggeration. Isn't that right, Elaine? So I'm going to call to our stage Elaine Stanley. Please welcome Elaine.
Hello, hello. Mute myself.
You're good.
Oh, okay. I've
You're
got a
all
sign
ready.
in the middle of my screen. Okay, I got it. All right, hello. We talked about spring in our last swap, and it's probably colder today and rainy and wintry than it was last month when we had our swap. And so I brought a spring story about Senior Snake. Now, Senior Snake lives way north, up in Maine. And every year he makes sure he's the first snake to hatch out. So he can catch all the new baby snakes as they come out from hibernation and teach them how to hiss. He's just appointed himself the head teacher, and the little junior snakes don't know any different. And so he gets out early, and that would probably be in our terms around the end of June or maybe even early July. before things melt up in Maine. So if you went there today, you would not see Senior Snake. But he's out early every spring, waiting for the junior snakes. And as they hatch out and come out, he starts teaching them how to hiss. And pretty soon, all around Piscataquis County, Maine, he's got little junior snakes hissing on the bushes, hissing on the curbstones, hissing on the tires of the cars and the trucks. And they are just everywhere. And he encourages them at every move. He tells them how good they are, how well they're doing, and how they just have the perfect right to hiss anywhere in Piscataquis County. So he is now famous for all the junior snakes and how well they can hiss. Well, one day, one of the little junior snakes wandered off down the road and found Mrs. Potts' house. By accident, he had gone around back and discovered she had a huge pit in her backyard. And he came back to town and he gathered up all his friends and he said, "Hey, come with me. I've got a perfect place we can hiss. It's perfect. It's perfect. Come." So all the junior snakes followed him and out they went to Mrs. Potts' pit. They lined up around the pit and they started hissing as hard as they could, practicing their hissing in every way, shape, and form. When Mrs. Potts came out, and she was not at all pleased to see all these junior snakes around the pit. She screamed at them, "Get out of here. This is my pit. Go away. Go away." And she shooed them off her property. And so those little guys were just slithering on their bellies back to town. And there was Senior Snake, and he saw them coming. And when they got within earshot, he said, "What's wrong? What are you doing?" And they said, "Well, we wanted to hiss in Mrs. Potts' pit, and she came out and she had a fit and said we can't do that. She wouldn't let us hiss in her pit." "What? That's ridiculous. You are proud Piscataquis County snakes, and you can hiss anywhere you want in Piscataquis County, anytime you want." Well, hearing that, they were typical junior snakes. If she said they couldn't be there, and Senior Snake says they could, well, where would we go? Of course, we'd go back to Mrs. Potts' pit. So now they all lined up around the pit, and they were just having a hissy fit. They were hissing loud, hissing low, hissing high. They were having contests. Who could hiss the loudest? Who could hiss the farthest? When Mrs. Potts came out and jumped up and down and threw a hissy fit. "You cannot hiss in my pit. Get out of here." She was really almost making them laugh. If they hadn't been crying so hard, they would have been laughing as they slithered back to town going, "What do we do? She won't let us hiss in her pit." And there was Senior Snake. He stopped them all and he says, "Now what? Now what's going on?" And they told him, Senior Snake, why they weren't hissing in Mrs. Potts' pit because of her hissy fit. He said, "This is ridiculous. I've done this for so many years and all my snakes can hiss anywhere in Piscataquis County they want. I can't believe this. Why, I knew Mrs. Potts before she had a pit to hiss in." The end.
I can't believe you didn't make a mistake once in that story. It would be so easy to. Oh, Elaine, that was so masterful. Wow. And the hissy fit in the middle. Oh, Mrs. Potts' pit and the hissing in the. Oh my, I wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you for that. It was really nice to laugh really hard. So we have another sign up here. And I think the only one past Sharon might be Ed with a longer story. But be sure to let Katie know if you have a story to tell. She'll stick you in the list.
Brandon, we have Sharon, we have Vicky, we
Oh.
have Ed, and then we have I will tell at the end.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's further down in the chat or something.
Yeah, I put myself in and I didn't put Ed in, but I want to have Ed in before I tell. So,
Okay, very good.
so
But
thank you.
one thing is for sure, and that is the next teller is Sharon. So let's bring Sharon up to the stage. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. This story is true and not at all exaggerated. So we shall see. In order to understand it, you need to know what a bear garden is. And you may not know that. Do you know what a bear garden is? No. Okay. It's an old-fashioned term from the 18th and 19th centuries, and it means a complete mess. So you might walk into your teenager's room and say, oh, this is a bear garden, that kind of a thing. Only this story has a bear garden with real bears. And it is true. When Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase, he more than doubled the size of the United States. But very little was known about what was out there and what had actually been purchased. So the first task was to send out some expeditions and find out what they had. So Lewis and Clark were dispatched to the west, and all along their way, they had huge adventures and covered themselves with glory as they searched for the Northwest Passage. When you go there now, you go through Lewiston and Clark County and so many things named for them, and every history book includes them, and they are just covered in glory. Many people don't know that another expedition went out at the same time, led by Zebulon Pike, and he was also covered, but not with glory, with other things. He went up, his first task was to try to find the Mississippi River headwaters. And they determined that they would go by dugout canoe. So as some native folks that were nearby in the Ojibwa tribe watched these soldiers trying to build dugouts, they determined that they needed some help. And so they came up and offered to assist them, having been making dugout canoes for many generations. And Pike said that he didn't believe simple savages had anything to offer the United States Army in the way of useful information. Thank you very much. We'll make our own canoes. And so they did. And when they loaded all of their goods into those canoes, all of their clothing, everything, they're ready to go, they all sank and soaked everything through, including their ammunition. So Pike, realizing that this was not a very good thing, said, let's spread all that gunpowder out to dry on trays, and we'll put them over the campfires to speed up the process. Well, once all the fires were out and the goods that remained were recovered, they went on their way. They went up to Wisconsin. They found the headwaters of the Mississippi, which, as it turns out, are actually in Minnesota, but Pike reported where he thought they were, and they went on back. His second assignment was to take that expedition south, looking for the headwaters of the Red River. And on their way, they accidentally, I think it was accidentally, entered into Spanish territory in Mexico, and they were all arrested. So it took some serious negotiations with Washington and President Jefferson to get Pike released, but some of his men were held as kind of human collateral, and they stayed there for several years. And that seriously impacted their faith in his leadership style. On the way back, he saw this enormous mountain in Colorado, one that would later bear his name. And so they determined to make the ascent. And Pike packed all of their goods, and up the mountain they went. And about halfway up, they realized they hadn't brought sufficient supplies to actually complete the ascent and reach the summit and come back down. So they turned around and went down, and Pike never climbed Pikes Peak. He's not having a good run of dispatches that he's sending home to President Jefferson. Things are not sounding the way he wishes they did. And he needs to do something to make himself look better in the president's eyes. And on the way, he runs into a Native American man who's selling these adorable bear cubs, 2 of them. And he knows that President Jefferson loves the natural world and finding things. And these are a breed of bear that has never been seen on the East Coast. So he loads them up and sends them by courier on horseback to the White House as a gift for the president. Well, those grizzly bear cubs lived in the White House for a very brief period of time because they doubled in size almost every week. And pretty soon they had to be put out on the White House lawn. And President Jefferson was puzzled and flummoxed about what to do with this gift. And then he realized that he had a friend named Peel who was opening a natural history museum in Philadelphia. So he wrote to Peel, and he actually said in the letter, this is true. He said, these bear cubs are very calm and friendly and even amiable. And so Pike said he would be delighted to put them on exhibit in the museum. So having turned the White House into a bear garden, the grizzly bears arrived in Philadelphia. Once they broke out and tore through the building, Peel decided that they would make a better exhibit once they were stuffed. And that was their ultimate fate. Pike himself went on to a form of immortality because today, when the old men sit around the coffee shop chatting and telling each other lies, if one of them doesn't pay his share of the bill or reneges on his bets, they say, what can you expect? He's a piker.
Wow. Well, I know what my history lesson is for my students tomorrow. Oh my goodness. Sharon, thank you for that. That was wonderful. Bear garden. Yeah, I'm living in a bear garden. Anyway, I think flummoxed is emerging as the word of the evening, by the way. Well, thank you, Sharon. That was absolutely wonderful. So I think that Katie is probably going to have to help me out. Did we have Vicky next? Is that right?
Yeah, we did. Vicky was.
Okay. So let me find Vicky. There is Vicky. Please welcome to our Do Tell Zoom stage, Vicky.
Okay. I'm unmuted, right? Yes. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about a woman named Alma Tidybones. Now, Alma Tidybones had the neatest house in the block. It was perfectly white, sparkling. Her vegetable gardens were so neat, there wasn't a leaf out of place. Her trees didn't drop leaves in the fall because Tidybones did not like mess, so they didn't. When the storms came to everybody else's yard, they didn't come to Tidybones' house because she didn't like mess. Okay. Tidybones had a pretty good life there going for herself. Everything in a place and everything perfectly clean. And that's just how she liked it. So, one night she was reading up in her bed with her fluffy comforter and her bed all cozy and warm with her book and her cup of tea and her bookmark because she didn't hold with people who put like receipts or scraps of paper as bookmarks. If you're going to read a book, use a bookmark. All right? It's not rocket science. So she had her bookmark by her side. She was reading. And out of the silence, she heard tickety tick tick, tick, tickety tick 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 tick, like somebody tapping on the glass window with their fingernails. Tickety tick 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 tick. And then she heard thump, flap, thump, flap, flump, flump. So Tidy Bones gets herself out of bed and goes to the window and throws open the curtains and looks out at an immense blackness of night, except for fish. Fish were swimming by her window, left and right, silvery, goldy, shimmering, schools of them going who knows where, coming from who knows where. Fish with eyes like headlights, gleaming, glistening, slithering. It was beautiful, but what fish outside the window, second floor, dark. Why are fish there? It was messy, okay? She didn't like it at all. So she closed the curtain and she took a deep breath and tried to get a hold of herself. Alma, she said, there cannot be fish outside the window. That would not be right. And she opened the curtain and looked again, and they were still there. And they were looking at her with their big eyes as they swam by. Big iridescent bubbles coming from their mouths. Get out of here, she screamed. You don't belong here. And she gave them her biggest stank eye. They just swam and swam, more of them, eels, rays, fish. So she closed the curtain, went back to bed, put the pillow over her head and turned out the light and slept. Well, this went on for a couple of nights. And Alma had had enough because, you know, this isn't what Alma wants and it's not what Alma's going to get. So she thought to herself, okay, what can I do to get rid of the fish? And it occurred to her, wait a minute, I could dig up worms and heave them into my neighbor's yard and they'd all go over there because fish like worms. And then she thought, messy, don't want to do that. Messy. Then she thought, you know what fish really hate? They hate cats because cats eat fish. So Alma was nothing if not inventive. She went down into her basement and she cut out kitties out of cardboard, out of wood, out of anything she could find. They had big glowing eyes. They had paws that moved back and forth. They screeched, they screamed, they squealed, they squeaked. And they were all larger than life, big balloon kitties, little tiny kitties in the gutters. And they were everywhere, all over the house, on the roof, on the yard. They were everywhere. And all she had to do was flick a switch and the kitties started moving back and forth and their eyes flashed and they started screeching and squalling. And it was just the most wonderful cacophony. Yes, thought Tidy Bones. So she went to bed and she pulled up her fluffy comforter and she got out her book with her bookmark and she read and she read and she read. And it was silent. So she got up and she looked out the window. Not a fish to be seen, just like she knew, because they don't like cats. So, oh, Tidy Bones had won. Tidy Bones had won. Tidy Bones victorious. So she went back to bed and all was well for a couple of nights. Then one late afternoon, she started hearing people talking and laughing. And she looked out her other window and there up on the hill were a bunch of people gathering and they were just looking down at her house. So Tidy Bones got her cardigan sweater, very sensible, and her ironclad walking shoes, and she went up the hill. And when she got there, it was starting to get dark. And there were crowds and they had barbecues out and they had little hibachis and they were doing hot dogs and hamburgers and veggie tofu thingies, and they were sitting in aluminum lawn chairs, and the kids were running around, and the young people were doing their texting thing, and the older people were adjusting their hats, and everybody was talking and having such a good time, but they were all looking down at her house. So she wandered among them, waiting for one of them to say, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry, we're looking at your house," but nobody said that. And she found an empty chair, and she looked at the woman sitting next to it, who was so sweet, and patted on the chair. So she walked over and she sat down in it. And she said to the woman, "Why are you here?" And the woman said, "Oh, you've never seen this. Oh, you've got to watch. When the sun sets, it's beautiful." And presently, people got quieter and more still, and the children sat down in the grass. And the sun went down and went down farther until the sky was orange. But miraculously, the light came through the kitty cats and shone like jewels and amber and ruby and, oh, magnificent colors. And they glinted off the light, and they shone lights off left and right, and the paws threw huge shadows down all over them. And the people just watched it, and they were quiet. And even Elma was transfixed. She had no idea what she had done. It was beautiful. It was like watching a treasure with all the jewels alive. It was beautiful. It was so beautiful. She had no idea what she was doing, and she reached up and took somebody's hot dog and started eating it. Nobody cared. The sun went down and went down and went down until the sky was that beautiful, brilliant cobalt. And the kids started getting restless, and they started running around, and presently the stars started to come out, and people lit sparklers, and people went back to gossiping and joking and telling about their vacations, and everybody went back to having a good time. And the woman who sat next to her said, "Wasn't that amazing?" And Alma had to admit it was. And the hot dog was good too. And she got up and brushed herself off, and she excused herself and started to walk away, and turned around, and everybody waved, and she said, "I'll be back tomorrow night." And all the way down, she thought about, "I like that mess. I think I'm going to bring my famous homemade macaroni salad tomorrow night. They'll love it." Oh, and one more thing. I don't know if you can see these. I had a friend who did, can you see that? Hard to
Yeah.
tell. Can you see that?
The fish.
The fish.
Yes.
And he did another one.
Oh my God.
Of the kitties.
Oh.
That's Alma down at the bottom.
Oh, Vicky, that's so wonderful. You could tell the story and have the pictures right behind you, maybe too. Is that a story you created?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, very imaginative. I was thinking, I guess the only thing messier than a bear garden is a floating fish garden
Yeah,
in this case.
yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Vicky. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Well told. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Katie, we're going to do Ed and then you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was wondering, Brandon, sorry,
Yes.
shall we have a break? Shall we do circle, and then does that?
That's a good idea. And then we'll have some stories to come back to.
Yeah, after the break. Yeah,
Wonderful.
thank you.
So if you're new to Do Tell, midway through, we usually stop and introduce ourselves. We say where we're from, our names, and then there's usually a little prompt. And for tonight, the prompt I suppose has to do with the spirit of spring, because there's kind of music in the air when spring comes around. And so I was hoping maybe you could just say what your favorite song is, or what your favorite composer is, or musician. And so I'll introduce myself again. My name is Brandon Spars. I'm a high school teacher in Santa Rosa. And over the years, I have to say one song has remained my favorite. It still gives chills up my spine when I hear it. And it's New Year's Day by a band called U2. They're kind of a alternative rock band, but it's an absolutely beautiful and chilling song at the same time, New Year's Day. And so I will move next to Katie Mangan, and she can introduce herself.
Okay, hi. Um, Hi, I'm Katie Mangan. I live in Santa Rosa, and my favorite group has to be the Beatles.
Very good. It's hard to argue with that. And Elaine.
Oh,
You're muted.
There you go. Hi, I'm Elaine Stanley. I live in Santa Rosa. And I don't know that I have a favorite song, because I love all the old folk songs of Peter, Paul and Mary, Kingston Trio, all of them. So when you're in the car driving down the road, can you go from Southern California, say LA, to San Francisco singing songs? No favorite, just folk songs.
Wonderful. I was just listening to John Henry today.
Ah,
And Vicky.
I unmuted. Well, of course, Motown. When I grew up, that was I can't not sing to Motown. So I think that the favorite song I think is a hard one. There is a wonderful song, Finlandia, the classical song, and it was written, I understand, specifically as the Finland national song. That the point of it was that we are all brothers and sisters. And it became a hymn that said the same thing. And it's just become a song to so many different traditions about oneness of people. So it's a lovely song. And anyway, I forgot. My name's Vicki Ness, and I live in Sebastopol, and I'm retired. So
Thank you, Vicki. And next will be Sharon.
I'm weird about that because I really don't like anything much after about 1850. I'm caught in the wrong century, but I think right now, just today I was playing Pachelbel's Canon and realizing how simple it is, and how did he do something so beautiful with such simplicity? I think simple gifts, Pachelbel's Canon, those would be my favorites.
Thank you. And next will be Meg.
Blast from the Past, Grateful Dead. It says it all. Oh, and I'm Meg Brown from Forestville.
And next will be Ed.
Hi, I'm Ed Lewis from Davis, California, and my favorite music from my early childhood years is rhythm and blues and funk. And my artist is Ray Charles, who was born on the same day I was born, September 23rd. And he started his career on my birth date in 1946. He had his first gig in Seattle, Washington.
Wow.
And my favorite song by Ray is Georgia on My Mind.
Beautiful. And next will be Vina.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. Well, this is a tough choice because John and I listen to an opera several times a week on the free transmission from the Metropolitan Opera. I know I've told you guys that before, but it still remains exciting and wonderful to listen to that great music. But the other music that warms my heart is John's often got on the computer, his computer here beside me, Tuba Skinny. It's a New Orleans band.
Oh, wow.
They have such a wonderful sound. It reminds me of the music that we had on records when I was a kid. New Orleans music, I guess. So
Wonderful. Tuba Skinny.
Tuba
I'm
Skinny.
going to look that up.
Got
Thank you.
to. You'll love it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vina.
Yeah.
And next we have Ellie Shiva.
Hi, thank you. I like stuff I can sing along to, whatever. And it sort of varies off and on, but one thing I've always really liked, and I don't know why, except maybe because I was born in Detroit, Motown. I love Marvin Gaye's I Heard It Through the Grapevine.
Yes.
And one year we were driving from the Bay Area down to San Diego for a holiday. And we were going up the Grapevine just before you get to LA. And it came on the radio. I started singing it. And one of my daughters says, "Mom," the other one says, "Leave her alone." So I sang it. I would have anyway. But I love the folk music a lot. So so I live in Petaluma, and right now I am on a staff that is doing things by Zoom with developmentally disabled retired seniors. We used to be based in Odes in Petaluma, and now we are based in Roanoke Park, right next to the senior center. But of course, we haven't been there for a year. So we're doing Zooms a lot.
Yeah.
And
Zoom
it's really sort of fun.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is you don't have a bunch of people and you need to use the bathroom. You don't have to wait for several other people.
True.
That's one of the nice things.
Thank you.
It's enjoyment. And, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And next we have Genevieve.
Hi, yes, I'm Genevieve Franklin. I am a professional interpreter in Santa Rosa.
Oh.
And of course, now I'm professionally interpreting all over the country, but up and down California because of Zoom. You've mentioned some of the things that I like. I would mention a number of groups that are practically unknown from the years of psychedelia. Yeah. So you probably wouldn't recognize them, but they had some very great songs. And I tend to go I like a lot of things, but I tend to go for things that are optimistic. So things that came to mind are the 59th Street Bridge song, better known as Feeling Groovy. Or Here Comes the Sun, which was my favorite, but it got a little bit overplayed during the COVID year. And, but the one that really came to my mind is a song made popular by Louis Armstrong, which is It's a Wonderful World. Mm-hmm. He didn't write it. It was written by someone named George David Weiss, and it was very well accepted in the UK, and it was not accepted in the United States when it was first published, believe it or not, because a producer poo-pooed it. But love overcame that, didn't it?
I didn't know any of that. Next, we have Beth.
Well, it's fun to hear. I guess I'm unmuted already. It's fun to hear everybody's choices. Right now, my favorite music is The Rain, because I have a skylight above me and I'm really enjoying that rhythm the best right this minute. But as I was thinking, I love the music that's playing at the time a lot. And we have in the past traveled quite a bit to Hawaii. And so I really do enjoy listening to some of the very traditional Hawaiian songs, and anything that's with ukulele, and just I like that a lot. Very peaceful.
Thank you. And next we have Evelyn.
I lived in Sebastopol. I forgot to.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a lot of favorite musicians, but last week we saw a documentary about the band, and actually Bob Dylan was one of the people I loved a lot when I was young. And what was amazing in that documentary is they showed a concert that I was at in 1975. And, you know, I didn't go to that many concerts. So that was just one of those kind of cool things like, oh, wow, I remember going to that. Anyway, so, and I actually still do like the songs of Bob Dylan. And I live in Roanoke Park.
I wonder, did you see yourself at the concert in the footage?
No.
No.
I learned, that was when I learned the hard way that you could be at a concert and be really far away. Like we were definitely in the nosebleed section, but it was still cool to see that concert.
Very cool. And next is Gay.
Okay, I think I'm okay.
Yep.
Unmuted. Actually, I don't have a real favorite song, but I like what everybody's been saying about a lot. Like I was going to think of Bob Dylan just a minute ago, but the Beatles and stuff like that. But as time goes on, I notice that I'm changing, you know, more the old stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you, Gay.
Mhm.
And next is Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori. I live in Santa Rosa, and some of the songs that I had in mind when Brandon asked for favorites have already been mentioned. So it's nice that so many people enjoy the same music. And someone else said something about enjoying music you can sing along to, and that's really an upper for me too, like Zippity Doo-Dah or Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. That really does change the energy when you hear it, or especially when you sing it. And there's another song on the other side of the coin besides cheerful and uplifting. It's uplifting in a different way, and it's a song called Now, N-O-W, and it's by Dave Carroll. And it's beautifully sung. You can look it up on YouTube or just Google that to say song by Dave Carroll. And his last name is C-A-R-R-O-L-L. And it's just now is where we are. It's never been, it's being here now. And of course, we've had a lot of practice doing that in the last year.
Thank you, Lori. I am going to look that up. And
I'll put it in the chat.
please, thank you.
Sure.
Next is Nicoline.
My name is Nicoline, and I live in Santa Rosa. Well, I have difficulty deciding. There are so many songs I like. One in French, so you may not know it. It was sung by a singer, an old singer called Charles Trenet, and in French it was called La Mer. And I don't know if it was translated ever. It has a beautiful melody. La mer qu'on voit danser le long des golfes clairs. Maybe it was translated by the sea, I don't know. I would not be surprised it was translated. Another I like was by Armstrong. In French was Petite Fleur, small flower. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm not a great singer. But one you will know is Green Sleeve. I love Green Sleeve.
Me too.
Did I say that right? Green Sleeves? Yeah. And so many other. I was part of a singer circle, and we don't meet anymore, but we were singing a lot of American folk song. from that book, Rising Up Singing.
Ah,
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
right.
that
Yeah.
one. Yeah, so many beautiful songs, like Where All of the Flower Been and Pete Seeger, and yeah. Anyway, that's it for me.
wow. Thank you, Nicolene. Beautiful songs.
Mm.
And I think this could be the last person, but maybe Katie will check me on this. But Robert?
Yes, hi, I'm Robert Uleman. I live in Sebastopol, and asking for a favorite song is really tough because, wait, does this work? Okay. Yeah, I grew up with the Beatles, of course. During high school, had Led Zeppelin 2 etched into my brain. Kind of left it behind for jazz in college. And then I came out to California a long time ago, moved to the North Bay almost 20 years ago. I was never a fan of Grateful Dead, but started to appreciate the genius sometimes. Also falling in with a bunch of friends playing guitar. And lately discovered the song Althea, which I became obsessed with for a little while. But when I thought about it some more, and I had lots of time while all you gave us your ideas, I thought the one song that I would probably pick out is Can't Find My Way Home by Stevie Winwood. And mainly because no matter which version you look up, it cannot be destroyed. It is a fantastic song no matter who plays it. So anyway, that's probably my favorite.
Perfect. I think, let's see, we probably have not heard from Vel, is that right? So,
Hello.
Vel, I need you to turn the camera on. Let's see, where did you go? There.
And there's actually Dimitri's
Oh,
here too.
nice. All right.
One computer.
Bonus.
Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Dimitri. I'm in Roanoke Park, and I cannot name a favorite. I listen to too much music and too many genres. So I'll just give. Lately, I've found a new band that I find absolutely fantastic called the Aristocrats. They're a British power trio. They play rock, jazz, fusion. Very instrumental, incredibly virtuosic. I have no favorite song from them because everything I've heard is absolutely just amazing. That's the only thing I can offer. A lot of things everyone else has said would be on my list too.
Yeah, I have trouble choosing too. Lately, I've really been enjoying REM's Saturn Return, which is kind of like a science fiction ballad. I kind of think of it that way. And also Daniel Kahn's version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah in Yiddish, which is fun to listen to if you have a chance. Good to see you guys again. We've missed you.
It's nice to see you too. So we'll take a short, first of all, Katie, did I miss anybody?
No, you've got everybody. Awesome job.
Okay.
Brandon.
It's a little hard because for some reason my participants shift around every so often, so I can't just go down the list, but it was so nice to hear from everybody, and I'm going to definitely check out some of these songs that I haven't heard before. Excuse me. So now we're going to take a short break. You can turn your cameras off. I will pause the recording. And when we come back, we will have announcements and then some more stories.
Brandon, why don't we suggest like a 5-minute break? So
yes, 5 minutes. So,
well, or we go till about 8:08, like till 8:15. Shall we start again at 8:15?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, the room's open. If you want to remain and chat with somebody, that's fine too. I'm not turning the Zoom off or anything. So we'll resume the recording, and I am sure that people have announcements for the group. Ed, don't go away. I'll bet you have oh, he's not going away. He's fixing his backdrop. I'm sure you have some announcements because Ed, I don't know if everybody knows this, but he is the liaison between all of the different SWAPs and the Storytelling Association of California, SAC. And so, Ed, I imagine you're going to tell us some things that are going on around the state that have to do with storytelling.
Yeah, so on March 17th, we have the monthly genre storytelling, and it's myths and fables, and we have 7 tellers from different groups. And we have one teller from back east, who's an Irish person and who lives in the States, and he's going to be a guest teller. So, and one of our members from the Sacramento Storytellers Guild is going to be sharing a story, and she's from India. She's part of our group, and she shares there. The Sacramento, you can go online to the Storytelling Association of California, and you could look at all the SWAP groups, and some of them have easy access, like Katie was saying, and some of them it's a little harder to get into. But they have, gosh, there's probably 15 choices you could have during the month. So there's something you can do for many nights with that. And then the National Storytelling Network has an event called Earth Up. And that's coming up. I don't have the exact date, but that's coming up soon. It's all stories, environmental stories for a weekend. So that's the National Storytelling Network. You can go online for that. And I mentioned earlier, and it looks like Elaine Stanley is going to represent your group for the Liars Contest, which is April 17th, with 8 liars, good old liars, at the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. And I'll be sending flyers to Meg and people, and I'm sure they'll send them around. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ed. There's a lot going on. Once again, the Storytelling Association of California and the National Storytelling Network both have websites with a lot of announcements on them, including most of what Ed just announced, if not all. Okay. Does anybody else have an announcement?
I have a couple.
Great.
Oh, hello. My camera's a little bit all over the place. But on Fridays, I have a friend in Utah. Oh, there's our light. Hello, let there be light. I have a friend in Utah who has an organization called Story Crossroads, and every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, in our time zone, you can hop on and discuss different storytelling topics. She's a librarian as well, so she always takes really meticulous notes, and people from all over join. There's a woman who's an archaeologist from Argentina who's been joining lately. And this week, the topic is bridging differences when there's different political views in a room. So that's a pretty interesting one. I know someone who's doing storytelling in San Diego who has an event coming up next week, Storytellers of San Diego, and that one is free. It's a free festival. And then this isn't storytelling, but it's film, and it's kind of connected. Our local Jewish Community Center is doing an Israeli film festival, the second virtual Israeli film festival. And I know I'm not getting the information on here really with the way that the camera works here, but I can post a link in the chat. It's just, it's a film festival of all Israeli films. There's kind of unique ones like Kiss Me Kosher is a story of an Israeli girl who falls in love with a German girl. And so of course their families have a lot of conflict because there's a lot of history there and stuff. So it's kind of interesting, unique stories, and that's happening starting this Friday. So yeah, just a few things.
Well, thank you, Val. I've heard really good things about that festival too, so I highly recommend it. Other announcements? Okay, if there are any and you suddenly remember, there may be a moment at the very end of our meeting too. So, well, we are in for a treat. He is sometimes known as Eddie Spaghetti, and we know him more familiarly as Ed Lewis, but I couldn't resist, Ed.
Thank you.
I think you
Appreciate
have a story for us tonight.
Okay. So yeah, my Eddie Spaghetti was my nickname as a child. It was Eddie Spaghetti. The meatballs are ready, of course. I was surrounded by my baseball teammates when I crossed home plate with the winning run in the Los Angeles City Baseball Championship. I was the man. I was the real man. And afterwards, all us real men, a ragtime group of guys that got together through the Parks and Rec, went to the bar to have some shots of whiskey and some beer. And of course, we started talking about all our work in particular. Big Mike worked construction. Raging Rick said, oh, that's nothing. You know, I'm a steel worker. I built those tall buildings you can see out the window down there in Los Angeles. How about you, Ed? What do you do? I'm a preschool teacher. What? It was the same reaction I got from my father when I told him that I wasn't going to use my business degree to go into business, the business that he owned, because I wanted to be a preschool teacher. He said, a preschool teacher? Did I hear you right? Are you gay now, Ed? I said, no, Dad, I'm not gay. I just feel a real calling to work with young children. Well, this is an interesting calling, but you're eventually going to get married and have children, and you are not going to be able to support your family on the wages of a preschool teacher. Besides, that's women's work. I got the same reaction from my true love's father. Vicky and I met at a university in Mexico where I got a bilingual teaching credential. And at the end of the year, Vicky flew home from Mexico City to her home in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And then I drove my old Datsun B210 from Mexico City all the way up the coast to her house to meet her family. Her dad was a judge, her mom was a lawyer. They lived on 5 acres. They had an estate. I came in for the first meal. It was like being in Downton Abbey with this long table, dad at one end, mom at the other, Vicky and I in the middle, and the brother across from us. And Vicky's dad looked at me and he said, well, son, it seems like my daughter is real smitten with you. So how do you plan to provide for her in the lifestyle that she's accustomed to? Well, sir, as you might know, I got a bilingual teaching credential, and and we both of us speak Spanish very fluently. And I have decided that I'm going to go back to California and work as a preschool teacher in a migrant farm camp. To me, it would just really fulfill my heart. And he looks at Vicky and he says, "You brought me another one of those?" Of course, I didn't know what to say. And Vicky eventually married the vice president of Hilton Hotels. And they own 7 resorts around the world. And I'd have met her 32 years later. And I have a good story to tell about that at another time. Now I started to wonder, okay, am I not being manly enough? I play baseball, I fix my car, I don't cry. I keep my emotions in. I'm not vulnerable, and I am totally self-sufficient. And I knew I was a real man when I met John Wayne in the Amazon jungle in Leticia, Colombia, and I beat him at a rifle shooting contest. I had planned a summer vacation where I went the entire length of the Amazon River on boats and little plane hops and backpacking, some hiking through the jungles. And this cargo boat captain had told me about John Wayne and the Wild West show in Leticia, Columbia. So I got off the boat, and there was a 20-year-old couple from Minnesota that followed me, and we went through the jungles to this clearing. And it was everything that my childhood fantasies, of my childhood fantasies. There was an Old West saloon. There was a hitching post with a stallion next to it. And on the porch sat John Wayne in a rocking chair. He stood up, he came down the steps with his pinched cavalry cap, a white shirt with pearl buttons, a red bandana, an old rugged vest, and leather pants that were held up by a fancy silver buckle and a belt that held 24 bullets and 2 Colt 45s, the same ones Billy the Kid used and were said to have won the Wild West. He looked at us and said, "So what's a couple of ugly old guys like you doing with this really good-looking girl here?" "Well, John, I was working a mine up in Texas, a gold mine. And they told me that you had a coal mine down here in the jungles of the Amazon, and that you would put me to work if I could get down here. You would make me a multimillionaire." So I got on my horse in Texas, and I rode all the way down here to Leticia, Columbia on the Amazon just to see you and get a job. He liked what I told him, so he said, "Come on in. I'll give you a shot of whiskey for that cockamamie story." So we went through the swinging doors. And again, I was back in my childhood fantasy. A long bar stools, a huge mirror, animal heads all over the saloon. And on the next to the dance floor were 5 tables. 4 of them had old people. They were like tourists. They were like in their 40s. And in the middle were 4 cowboys and a cowgirl. And those cowboys all had a Remington revolver on the table next to their cards. 2 of the cowboys had Winchester rifles, and 2 of the cowboys had double-barrel shotguns. The woman had only an 1897 Merlin rifle because she was none other than Annie Oakley, the sharpshooter of the West. John Wayne stood up and said, "All right, folks, it's time for the Wild West show to begin." And we went outside, sat on hay bales, watched bareback riding, calf roping, llama herding. And that's when I challenged John Wayne to a shooting contest. You see, I'd been drafted during the Vietnam War, and I had become a weapons specialist, and I was an excellent shot. And I beat John Wayne, and that's when I knew I was the real man. Well, after the show was over, John took us back inside, said, "Okay, well, of course, I'm not John Wayne. John Wayne died in 1979, which is the year I was there," which of course I knew. But he said, "I always loved John Wayne. I was born in Germany, and I was in Germany during World War II as a young child, and we had to flee the Russians who were advancing into Eastern Germany. And my parents brought us here to Brazil, where I grew up. And I followed my passion and opened up this saloon, a hotel, a Wild West show, and a tour company. And you young guys here, I want to tell you that what's important is that you follow your dreams. Don't let anyone's expectations get in the way of you doing what you really want to do, because that's how you're going to find joy in life. And you said you're going to be a preschool teacher. Way to go, Ed. Just do that. Don't let anyone deride you in your goal. Well, I came back to the States and I got my degree in human development, and I was a preschool teacher for 10 years. And then I taught college for the rest, early childhood education for the rest of my career and retired. But I did have to buck the stereotype of being a man in a women's career. But with the words of wisdom from people like the wannabe John Wayne and other good friends of mine, I redefined my definition of what it is to be a real man. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I guess kind of validates the decision I made too. I'm not a preschool teacher, but I'm a teacher. The idea of herding llamas is a great image. Well, thank you for that story. That was wonderful. I don't know about you, but last time Katie was the final storyteller, and she weaves this world in her stories, and I know I had dreams about crossing the creek and sleeping in the grass. It really stays with you and goes down deep. So I think we're in for another treat. And what a great way to end our evening is with a story from Katie Mangan.
Thanks, Brandon. I hope you enjoy this story. Again, as you did last time. Actually, we're going to revisit the creek. Eduardo had 4 children, a daughter, Raven, 2 sons, and then another daughter, Rose. Rose was named after Eduardo's grandmother, Eleanor Rose. Eleanor was a gifted healer. You and I would call her a shaman. She foraged for herbs and plants, and she grew them, and she made her own medicines and tinctures, and she also kept bees. And she was well respected in the world of women's medicines and magic. And she had a vast amount of knowledge. And she longed for a daughter to pass this knowledge on to, but she had six sons. And so she looked for a niece or a granddaughter, but there was nobody who was going to be just right. Nobody was perfect. The person who came close to this was Eduardo. And so she began to pass on this magic, this wisdom, this knowledge to Eduardo as a young boy. And when the women and the men of the community found out that Eduardo was then a teenager, that he held more knowledge than they did, they were furious. But Eduardo always felt that he was the caretaker of this wisdom, and that he hoped he would have a daughter who would be the successor, who would be the chosen one. Then he could pass on this wisdom to her. When Rose was just a baby, she was born about this time of year. It was still early spring, cold. One day she was really fussy, and so Eduardo decided he'd wrap her in a blanket and took her outside, and he took her to the walled garden, and he showed her around where he was going to plant things, and just talked about all the plants that he would have, like her great-grandmother, Eleanor. And also he kept bees. But baby Rose was fussy, and so he decided to leave the garden, and he walked out into the meadow. And as he walked across the meadow, he was coming to the creek. He explained to her that the creek was the boundary between the real world, or the everyday world that you and I live in. And beyond the creek was the world of mystery and magic, of the deep woods and of the forest. And as he put his foot onto the wooden bridge, there was a flash of bright blue feathers, and a kingfisher flew out from under the bridge. And it immediately took him back to being a small boy, standing on the bridge with his grandmother, Eleanor. and watching the kingfisher. And it felt that Eleanor was so close. So close, he couldn't see her, but he could smell her perfume. And then he sensed her putting her arms around him. And there was baby Rose in the center. Was she the chosen one? When Rose turned 6 years old, a birthday party was planned, and it was going to be in the walled garden. Well, Eduardo was not happy about this because the walled garden to him was sacred. That's where he grew a lot of his herbs that he made into the medicines and the tinctures, and that's where the bees were kept. But anyway, the party went on as planned. And there were some cousins from the city visiting them. And one of the cousins was a young teenage boy named Arthur. He was just so bored out of his brain being in the country. And he was so frustrated with his country cousins because even though he was older and bigger and taller, he was outrun, outjumped, out everything by these country cousins. So Rose watched Arthur as he went from sort of group to group in the garden. She was an observer, even at that young age. And she watched him, and he found in the corner of the garden the beehives. And so she followed him. And he turned and he looked at her and he said, "Where the bees then?" "They're in the hive." "Well, what are they doing?" "I don't know. Sleeping." "Well then, let's wake them up." She knew better than to try and dissuade him or to say anything. And so she turned around and walked towards some adults. But as she walked away, she could hear his boot beating against the wall of one of the hives. And she turned to see that he was trying to rock it. And then she saw the bees begin to fly out. And they buzzed around his head, and he was trying to swat them away. And of course, he got stung. And so he went yelping to his mother. Eduardo had sort of thought something like this might have happened. And so he had his beekeeper's smoker pot. And so he could sort of calm the bees and get them away from Arthur with the smoke. And also he and two beekeeper friends, they used their fingernails and they just took out all the stingers in his hands and his face. So when they'd taken care of Arthur, they turned around, and to their horror, they saw a black wave of bees coming out of the hive. And they were going to the first object that they could find, which was Rose. And there she was covered in bees. Eduardo was the first by her side. And he began again to use the smoke to move the bees off her. And eventually, all the bees left. "Rose, Rose, are you okay?" She slowly opened her eyes. "I'm tired." And he wrapped her in his arms and he took her back to the house. He took her upstairs and he put her in her bed. And she just lay there, the eyes closed. "Rose, Rose, please speak to me. Are you okay?" And her eyes slowly opened. "Shh, Dad. The bees, they're singing to me." And then she closed her eyes and fell into this deep, deep sleep. And he sat by her bed throughout that evening and into the night. And he kept wondering, what were the bees telling her? Well, of course, he would never know. But he was certain of one thing. It was Rose who was the chosen one. Blessings, abundance, and healing to you all.
Oh, Katie, that was another beautiful installment.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, we have come to the end of another monthly meeting. And I can tell how happy we are to see one another in our circle, the way we're reaching out to one another and connecting with our songs and our stories, of course. I want to thank all the storytellers. And of course, Meg Brown and Katie Mangan for organizing this. And it's just really wonderful to see each and every one of you. And I'm looking forward to 4 weeks from now. It will already be April. My goodness. So if there are no other announcements, I think I'm going to say good evening and until we meet again. Thank you all.
I have one quick announcement.
Yeah, of course, Ed.
On April 8th, I'm driving to Portland. I've had my vaccinations. My son's had his vaccinations, and I am going to get to see my twin grandchildren, a boy and a girl, and celebrate their first birthday the entire weekend. I'm so excited.
Oh. Ed, we're so happy for you. I think we'll see you right after that then, right?
Yeah,
Or
maybe.
when
I'm
did
not
you
quite
say
sure.
you're going?
I'm going April 8th.
April 8th. So maybe, hopefully we'll get to see you shortly thereafter. I don't know what the next day is, but anyway, we're very happy for you. And it's wonderful because things are beginning to open up a little bit. And we'll all have moments like that.
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
It's the 13th.
The 13th, good. So Ed, hopefully we'll see you right after that.
So Brandon,
Yes.
I would like to say thank you so much. You do such a beautiful job. You make everybody feel so welcome. And the tellers, you just sort of make such wonderful comments. And we are so grateful that you will be our MC every time, but you must start telling us stories because, you know,
Yes.
you are the best. Okay.
Oh,
so next time.
We would love to have
I promise next time I will have one. Yes.
Oh, good.
Thank
I'll
you.
be on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for wonderful stories, well told.
Thank you,
Lori.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, Robert.
Bye.
Ed, how would I get a link? How will I get a link to the Liars Contest?
We will send it to you, but it will be on the SAC website. It's just part of our monthly meeting. And it's the same every month. It's the same link. So, but as a teller, you'll be getting it, and you know, I'll make sure you get it.
All right. And do I have to pay some money?
No,
Oh,
no. Hopefully, you can earn 100 or 50 bucks. You know,
that'd be fun.
that'd be nice.
I don't know if I can make it make sense and squeeze it down to 7 minutes.
Yeah, I know for sure.
We'll see.
Great.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Bye-bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
Katie.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Wonderful.
Bye. Bye, Katie. Bye, Meg. Bye, Elaine. Bye, Gay. Bye, Val.
Awesome. Bye, Elaine.
That was fun.
Bye.
Bye now.